All right, everybody, this is notes for Module 20 and technically 21. Basically, your book goes and kind of puts fiscal policy and divides it up, I think, kind of weird, between Module 20 and 21. So you'll find that this video is kind of talking about a little bit of both. I kind of mixed up the order because I think it makes more logical sense this way. So just be aware of that. All right, so fiscal policy. Remember, fiscal policy is going to be anytime the government gets involved to try and correct a recessionary or inflationary gap. So basically, there are two types of tools that the government can choose to use. So the first type of tool is what we call discretionary fiscal policy. And discretionary fiscal policy is a result of actions of the policymakers. So essentially what this means is that, yes, it does require an act of Congress. So the Congress does need to get involved and actually go and get their butts in gear and change something. So they could change spending, they could change taxes, whatever. So this is going to be changing spending or taxes, but like I said, it requires an act of Congress. So I like this one. It says raise taxes or cut spending, neither of which are great options. Nobody likes either of those options, but sometimes they are necessary. So the other type of tool is what we call a non-discretionary or an automatic stabilizer. Your book calls it an automatic stabilizer. I've seen it in other books or in other places called non-discretionary fiscal policy. Either one works, it's fine. But basically the way non-discretionary or an automatic stabilizer works is that there are rules that are in place already that causes fiscal policy to kick in when it's needed. So what happens is that, for example, you have maybe during a recession, okay? So I have these two pictures of these guys here. One's sitting on a big old pile of gold coins. One of them's on a smaller pile of gold coins, okay? During a recession, what happens? Well, during a recession, we have people making less money. So they go from maybe this big guy here that has this big pile of coins to this little guy. What happens to the amount of taxes that you have to pay? Well, as the picture demonstrates, this guy's kicking in more money because he has more money to begin with. This guy doesn't have as much, so he kicks in less. That's an automatic stabilizer, meaning that as a recession occurs, okay, people don't have a whole lot of money out there, so as a result, we're not going to expect them to pay as much into taxes. So if they don't pay as much into taxes, the hope is that it causes the aggregate demand curve to be less of a shock, right? Less of a demand shock. So examples of this, like I said, during a recession, more people get they're going to have less taxes, but also, for example, they'll get more unemployment benefits. So they will, for example, as their recession occurs, more people will get unemployment benefits. So again, that's a source of income for them, so that it's going to be better than getting no money at all. So the intention is with an automatic stabilizer is that hopefully it will kind of lessen the impact of a negative demand shock. Now, the other side of this, for example, back in 2008 time period, okay, one of the things that during that recession is that there was a lot of people that were unemployed, and it was taking a really long time to find a job. So yeah, a lot of people were getting unemployment benefits, but because it was taking so long to get a job, the amount of time, because they actually have a limit as to how long you can collect unemployment benefits, and I believe it's currently at 12 weeks, but during a recession time period, 12 weeks is nothing. You know, if it's a bad recession like the last one was, it's going to take you a lot longer to find a job. And so what happened is that they increased the length of time that you could collect unemployment benefits. So they didn't increase the amount of unemployment benefits you got, they just increased how long you could collect. So here's my question. Is that an example of discretionary fiscal policy or automatic stabilizer? Hopefully you said it was a discretionary fiscal policy, because discretionary fiscal policy, it did take an act of Congress to actually decide, yes, we are going to extend unemployment benefits during this recession. People need more unemployment benefits, so they actually extended it. Okay, now both of these discretionary and non-discretionary tools can be using they can either be used to fight recessionary or inflationary gaps. So I'm going to talk on this slide about recessionary gaps, and then the next slide I'll talk about inflationary gaps. So What happens with expansionary fiscal policy is that they are fighting a recession. So think about it is that with a recession, things are down, expanding, expansionary. We need to expand things. We need to make things better because we're down in the dumps during a recession. Okay? So they're hoping to shift the aggregate demand curve to the right with some combination of the following. So first of all, I'm going to draw it for you. So this is essentially what we have happening. We have our short-run equilibrium is over here, and we are wanting to shift our aggregate demand curve to this purple line over here and eventually move the equilibrium to this E2 spot. That's what we're doing with expansionary fiscal policy. So how do we do that? Well, one way we could do that is by cutting taxes. Cutting taxes leaves consumers more money, so therefore they will spend more. Okay. Or we could increase government spending. So increasing government spending will definitely increase the amount of aggregate demand out there. Because remember, aggregate demand is made up of consumer spending, investment spending, government spending, and net exports. By increasing government spending, that's one of those components. The third thing I have is one of the other things that they could also do is they could also go and increase transfer payments. And so, for example, in 2008, when they went and sent out stimulus checks, as they called them, they literally sent out a check in the mail. I got one, where they actually sent out a check in the mail to your household, depending upon the size of your household, how much money you got. But they called it a stimulus check, and you were expected to go and spend it. Well, whether you did or not, that was up to you. But the third way that they could go and fight a recessionary gap is going to be through an automatic stabilizer. So, for example, when there's less income because of a recession, it lowers the taxes they're collecting, but it also increases the transfer payments, such as, for example, unemployment benefits. So any of those things, a combination of those, some of this, some of that, will fight a recessionary gap. And this is called expansionary fiscal policy. And like I said, this can apply to discretionary or non-discretionary tools. All right, so then we can also talk about contractionary fiscal policy. And contractionary fiscal policy is obviously going to fight the opposite, the inflationary gap. So we're trying to move the aggregate demand curve to the left with some combination of the following. So first of all, I'm going to show you the graph. So here we have our graph, and this is essentially where we're at currently with our short-run equilibrium. We are trying to essentially move our aggregate demand curve to the left from AD1 to AD2, and we're trying to get to this equilibrium that is E2, okay? Because then we're at our potential GDP. So how do we do that? Well, we could increase taxes, okay? These are not popular, by the way. People don't like inflation, but they also don't like the things that will fix inflation. So increased taxes, that means that consumers have less money to spend, so therefore they're going to spend less, which is going to shift our aggregate demand curve to the left. We could cut government spending. Again, government spending is one component of aggregate demand. Remember, it's including consumer spending, investment spending, government spending, and net exports. So that will definitely shift it to the left. We could also go and decrease transfer payments. So we could go and cut how much money people get, for example, for unemployment benefits or for welfare or Social Security, those kinds of things. Or we could let an automatic stabilizer take hold. And so when there's more income, as a result, just naturally they're going to pay more taxes, and just naturally there's going to be less people getting transfer payments, like, for example, the unemployment benefits or welfare, because more people have jobs, so they don't need them. So any combination of these would, again, fight the inflationary gap and move our aggregate demand curve to the left, which will help us put us at long-run equilibrium. All right, that's it for now. Let me know if you have any questions.